Hi, my name's Shane DeMars, and this is my stroke story. On June 22nd, 2024, I went for a motorcycle ride, which was just a normal day for me. It was a Saturday, it was beautiful out, and I was meeting up with a bunch of buddies, and we were going to a biker event. So there was a large group of us there. It was about an hour and a half from my house, so fairly close. I was feeling fine. No issues. My daughter said a couple days previous that I didn't look well, but I wasn't living well, so that could have had part of it as well. So anyway, met up with some buddies and we headed south down the highway. I live in Stony Plain, Alberta, and we were heading down towards Red Deer, just north of Red Deer. Gorgeous country. And so we're just ripping down the highway. There were 4 of us, and we got to the barbecue. There were a lot of people there. Some people had camped out overnight. It was a great day. There was some alcohol there. I wasn't drinking. I may have had a beer, honest officer, but that was it. We were there for a couple hours and decided to start heading home. And the barbecue was on an acreage with a long gravel driveway. I was riding one of my older bikes, no ABS, so it was a little sketchy stopping this bike on gravel on rainy roads. So I was aware of that, but I was still riding pretty good. It is fun, right? So ripping it up on the gravel, wah wah wah, and then the gravel turned into pavement, and that's where a buddy that was in front of me was slowing down to stop. They were coming up to a railroad track, and he was slowing down to stop. And I hit the rear brake. It locked up. I started sliding towards him. So what we do in situations like that is we jump on both brakes, so front and rear brake. The downside of front brake on anything a little bit slippery, if any of you have ever ridden, it locks up that front brake and just slams the bike down. It's a pretty weird phenomena. So I was hitting the front brake, expecting the bike to go down like that. It wasn't going down, but I was coming into my buddy. So for some reason, I decided to jump off my bike. I'm a big guy, and I think that I made the decision because I didn't want to squish him. So as I was sliding into his bike, I jumped off the right side of my bike, and my bike did make contact with his, but very little. I cracked his saddlebag with my crash bar, and that was all that happened. When I jumped off, I had landed on my shoulder and the right side of my head in the ditch, and which I've fallen many times in my life, and it's always been an option for me to just fall and try to recover. Well, this time I didn't recover so well. So I was going very slow by the time I jumped off the bike. Maybe I got that total ride from leaving the barbecue up the gravel driveway to the pavement. I doubt I would have hit more than 30 kilometers an hour. So when I bumped into him, it was a light tap. But just the way I landed was just really weird. I went to get up. I think the only way I can describe it is if you picked up a bag of crushed gravel, is how my body felt. So I knew things were broken. I didn't know what was broken. I didn't know how bad. I remember getting back up to my bike, coming out of the ditch. My buddies had picked the bike up at that point. There were 3 or 4 of them riding behind me. There were 2 in front of me. So they had picked my bike up. I went to go get on my bike because I was going to ride it home. They were, so I obviously hadn't had the stroke by that point, and I could still function. I was still walking. They were like, "No, buddy, you are not riding this bike." So I kind of pouted a little bit. Um, and they asked how I was feeling. I said, I'm not feeling very good. I got some serious broken bones going on here. So they asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to go home, go to the hospital in Stony Plain. So hour and a half ride north. So they helped me get into other friends. The friends of one of my friends that was there, his wife was driving. So they had a pickup truck. So they helped me get into the truck, and that's when I knew something serious was wrong. I started losing left leg. I couldn't get into the truck. So they had me sit down on the seat in the passenger side, and another buddy got in the driver's side, and they pulled me into the truck. Got my legs turned around. Wasn't working very well at that point, and we started heading north to Stony Plain. And I was having some serious issues breathing. Starting to get really dizzy and woozy. Told them I don't think I'm going to make it. Is there a closer hospital? So they grabbed the phone and got on the maps and found the Red Deer Regional Hospital. It was a good choice. So we turned around. We were just at the freeway, so it was a good spot to redirect. Turned around and drove into Red Deer and got me to the hospital fairly quick. In hindsight, my wife and I were both like, well, maybe we should have called an ambulance. But we had questioned my cousin, worked at that hospital, and someone had said that it would have been at least an hour to an hour and a half for an ambulance to leave the hospital, to get to my location, to get me back to the hospital. I think I was probably at the hospital within 45 minutes. So timing wise, it was probably the best decision. Um, we got to the hospital. I was having trouble getting out of the truck. So my buddies helped me get out of the truck. They grabbed a wheelchair, got me in that, rode me into the hospital, and then I was at admissions. And I was still there. I was still answering questions. I was able to get my wallet out, my ID out, and they were admitting me into the hospital. And then that was it. That's all I remember. At that point, they, now this is me, reflecting back from what I've been told and going, we've just reviewed some of the hospital notes at admission. They got me in to do some testing. They intubated me, a breathing tube down my throat. And I don't remember that. Then they had Stars Air Ambulance pick me up in a helicopter and fly me to Edmonton, to a hospital called the Royal Alex. I was admitted into the ICU there. This whole time, what I was going to do after that barbecue was ride out to a friend's house where my wife was and meet up with her. So she was having a barbecue as well. One of my buddies had called my wife when we got to the Red Deer Hospital and told them that I had hurt my shoulder. And my wife and friend were having a hot dog and a drink. And they're like, Shane just hurt his shoulder. He's okay. I'm notorious, like I said, for falling and healing. So no one took it very serious, understandably so. So anyway, they got me to the Edmonton hospital and got me. My wife at that point had tracked me down to being in Edmonton and in the hospital. Now my name is Shane DeMars, and Shane is my middle name. My first name is Terrence. So she's asking for Shane. Where's Shane? Shane DeMars. No, there's no Shane DeMars here. So they didn't compute the last name, I guess. Well, privacy rules probably as well. So it took them a bit to figure out where I was. They ended up finding me. I was in the Edmonton hospital. So they came in, and at that point they were hooked. I was hooked up to machines, and they reviewed. I was kind of fading in and out of consciousness, and they were just getting ready to load me up on some serious drugs at that point. They went over everything that was broken. I had broken 9 of my 12 ribs on my right side. 6 of them were floating, so that means there's a fancy word for it, but what it means is they're broken on both ends. So there's nothing holding the ribs in place. So half of my ribs were floating. I broke my clavicle, collarbone. I broke my scapula, shoulder blade, punctured the lung, and the lung was collapsed. Um, that wasn't the worst part, though. Then they asked my wife, "Do you know at what point he had his stroke?" She was like, "He had a stroke?" Yeah. So apparently I had broken a blood vessel. I broke 2 blood vessels, one in the right side of my neck, one in the left side of my neck. And the one in the right side of my neck had made it to my brain and started a brain bleed, which caused the stroke. So in doing that, that explains why I couldn't move my left leg to get in the truck or out of the truck. I couldn't breathe very well. I'd also torn the aorta in my heart, apparently over a previous tear, so there was scar tissue, so they couldn't operate on it. They kept me intubated to breathe. They had a neck brace on that was way too tight because they were worried about a broken neck till they could get me in and get me all scanned up. No broken neck, so they took this neck brace off. So I couldn't breathe because of my lung. And then they stick an air tube down my throat. And then they put on a neck brace that did not help the breathing at all. So then the hard drugs were put in, and I went under. And I don't really remember the timing on this now. So I faded in and out of consciousness for quite a while. Apparently it was days. And while I was fading in and out of consciousness, I had just some brutal hallucinations. And if ever any of you have ever been put under and experienced this, just the feeling of hopelessness. You can feel the drugs take effect. Everything gets dark. Can't react to the dream that you're in, and it's not like it's a vivid dream. It's not just walking down the street kind of thing. It was demonic. For myself, if any of you have had this experience, please shoot me a comment because I would love to talk to some people that have gone through similar things with this. I could hear the machines beeping in the background. I could also hear friends and loved ones in the room. And they were very concerned. The beeping would get slower and slower. And I would hear them. They'd hold my hand. And I could hear them talking, very concerned. And at one point, I remember the room just getting silent. And then beep, beep. And everyone's like gasping, holding their breath. I could hear my wife praying. Then a friend's wife, Jen, came up and whispered in my ear. Her voice just cut through everything. It was just very strange. The hallucination that I was having and continued to have, I kept returning to it, is they would take me into the basement of the hospital and it was a swimming pool. And it gets pretty graphic, so I'm not going to get into the horrible graphic images that I experienced. But it was atrocious. The only way I could relate it is it was hell, but it was in a hot swimming pool. And the beeping I could hear was the drugs being pumped into me. The swimming pool was full of handicapped, disabled people, parts of them floating, Like if their legs are paralyzed, their legs are on like floaties. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to get into this in this one. I don't want to reflect back on it. I've written it down. I've talked to people about it, and it was horrendous. Not typically a very fearful person, but I was scared to death. So I just kind of teetered on the edge of life and death physically while this was going on. And when the beeping would get slow, I could hear people saying, breathe. So I'd breathe, and the beeping would get a little faster. So I tried breathing harder. Beeping would get faster, and I could hear the relief in people's voices that were in the room. At one point, I woke up, opened my eyes, and my wife was there. My granddaughter was there. My two daughters were there. My cousins, had a couple cousins come in. They weren't sure if I was going to make it, so these are could be my last days alive. And I couldn't talk because I had a tube down my throat. I couldn't communicate to them. I was afraid these were going to be my last hours alive. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to communicate. So I figured that I could ask for a pen if I did that. Tried doing this, and it just looked like I was wiggling my hand. But trying to communicate to write, so I could at least tell them that I love them if I didn't wake up again. Well, as you can tell, I did wake up, and my daughter Shelby realized that I was asking for a pen. My parents were there at that point, so I was able to write a couple of notes. And I remember writing, "I'm sorry, Mom." My parents had recently, the last 4 years, 5 years, lost my brother. So I was really sorry and sad because I knew how much that tore them up. That now they were going to lose another son. Then they told me I didn't have anything to be sorry about. I also called my wife Mom. She's the mother of my children. So that one kind of apologized to two people at the same time. So she was telling me it's okay. I'm going to be okay. It was just so frustrating, and I was so lost not being able to communicate and talk and ask them not to put me back under. I didn't want any more drugs. So next time I had woken up, they wanted to do a tracheostomy, cut my throat, and put a breathing tube in. And then they needed to put a chest tube in through my ribs to my lung because my lung was collapsed. And when the lungs collapsed, they fill it up. What holds that lung in place is your ribs. My ribs wouldn't hold anything with the way they were broken. So a couple surgeries had to still happen. The breathing tube that they had in my throat was a big clip on my teeth. My teeth were holding it in place. And I was able to work that clip loose with my tongue so I could try to talk. And I did. I was able to pop it out of my mouth, which was quite the effort, but I did it. But I still couldn't talk very well. But I could make some sounds at that point. So then my wife wanted me to agree and approve to a tracheostomy that I didn't want to do. So she had to agree to it. That was a lot of stress on her. So she agreed to that. And next time I woke up, so back under for the surgeries. Next time I woke up, no voice at all. I had a tube coming out of my throat with the constant sound of air blowing and I was hooked up to a respirator. So the respirator was doing the breathing for me. So now I'm in my own room in ICU. I had visitors coming in. My buddies who was at the barbecue with were coming in. Family was coming in. My daughter just lived in the neighborhood where the hospital was in Edmonton, fortunately. So she was there a lot. My wife was in and out as best she could. Like I said, we live in Stony Plains, about 45 minutes from the hospital on a good day with little traffic. So she was trying to come in every morning and every evening. She spent a lot of time trying to calm me down. I was very, very frustrated, very angry, very sad, very depressed. I didn't want to live like this. I would have done anything to just end it there, feeling sorry for myself. I was able to hear, I was able to communicate by writing. We still have the notebook with all the notes written in it. Apparently my wife had ripped out and thrown out the really dark notes where I just wanted to finish it all. Well, fortunately I didn't. The struggle at that point then was nights. Nights were terrible. So everyone was telling me I need to sleep, try and sleep. They were giving me drugs to sleep. They'd give me drugs and I would go into hallucinations. Different ones. I wasn't going to the basement anymore, to the swimming pool. I was waking up what I thought was in some of the staff's houses. And I just wanted to go home the whole time. I thought that I could heal faster if I could get home. So I'd tell my wife to roll the bed stand closer to me, and I can use that to stand up. Unfortunately, she did not believe that I could stand because I couldn't stand. So thankfully, we didn't try this. I got her to agree to. I just kept taking notes, and I got her to agree to let me call my buddy. My buddy could come and get me. If anyone could get me out of there, is my friend Adam. So I called Adam. I was texting him. How did this work? I don't remember now. I might have had him on speaker. And Benji, my wife's name is Benjalyn. I call her Benji for short. He asked if I was eating on my own, breathing on my own. I said yes. They just needed to get me out of here. My wife piped up, "No, he's not." So that was the end of that. So I couldn't get home. I had one of the respiratory therapists. I think his name was Terry. Yeah. Agree with me that I told him I think I would heal a whole lot faster if I was at home. And he said he agreed. So I kept trying to get people, nurses, doctors, to help me get home because Terry said that I agreed that I would heal faster if I was at home. I figured I needed to get on the weights to work my arm because I couldn't get any movement out of my left arm. So at night, I would text my wife that I needed help. I would text several people. I went back and read some of those texts. Cannot understand them at all. So I was having to text with my right hand. My brain is just loopy. I needed help. Nobody would come help. Fortunately, I could text. So I would get my phone. I would take some pictures of the nurse's house that I was in to send to my wife She didn't believe me that I was not in my room anymore. And I would send her pictures of me in my hospital room. She would text back, "Yeah, that's your room, baby." There's no way this is my room. At one point, my wife had said, "Well, you can't come home. I can't take care of you." My wife has been fighting cancer for the last couple of years, so this was just another whammy. Life kicking us in the you know what. So my wife has gone through, at this point, 7 cancer surgeries now. Well, the first one was for cancer. The next 6 was for infections and her body just not fighting these infections from the surgeries. Basically, her insides were cooked from radiation and chemotherapy. So she was in no shape to be able to take care of me. But what I heard was, "Can't come home. I can't take care of you." So in my brain, I needed to find a place to live now. So I'm searching online for rentals with handicap access. It didn't go very well. At one point, when I was staying the night in one of the staff's houses, I had this discussion with her, obviously in my dream, because she had a tenant moving out of her basement suite. She was a nurse, so this would work perfect. Timing couldn't have been better. And the dreams are just so vivid and so clear. Like, I remember what this guy looked like, this tenant telling her that he had to move out. And I remember asking her if I could rent the place. She said, yes, I could. I don't remember for the value. And at the same time, she's taking blood from me on her dining room table. Her husband is there cooking dinner. Jerk chicken. Oh, yeah. So it was a good dream. Found a place to live. Got some jerk chicken. Getting my blood tested right there on the dining room table, so I don't need to go back to the hospital. This is perfect. So I'd rented a basement suite. I was feeling pretty good that at least I had a plan now. I just had to let everyone else in on the plan. So when my wife came in to visit, I had actually told her that I found a place to live. She didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to worry about taking care of me. It was at a nurse's house, so I was going to be taken care of. She could focus on her healing. She didn't know what I was talking about. What do you mean you can't come home? You said I can't come home. You can't take care of me. I did not mean you can't ever come home. You're definitely coming home. No, 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 no. I got this figured out. Don't you worry about it. So I informed the nurse then that I was going to be able to move into her house. We're going to need some help moving, obviously. She thought I was nuts. You're not moving into my house. Yeah, we have a deal. I'm renting your basement suite. No, you're not. I don't have a basement suite. Yeah, you do. That skinny guy is moving out. And you and your husband said you need to find a tenant. I'm your tenant. Apparently, I was not her tenant. So now that plan's out the window. So now I got to figure something else out. The dreams continued. I was in the ICU, so I had lots of sounds around me. I kept my door open. I was in my own room. There was a nursing desk right outside of a window that I could see from my bed. And there was always somebody there watching me. Well, not almost always. So when I was stirring and having issues, I couldn't sit up. Felt like my whole body was paralyzed. They kept me pretty loaded up too. Fentanyl, all sorts of stuff a person shouldn't be on. So my wife had made a deal with me, got me to agree that when I have these dreams, that they were actually dreams, and I was struggling, that she would call the nursing desk for the unit and have someone come and check on me. Well, it was just that same night, started having another one of these very vivid dreams. And this one was different because I was in a different staff's house, and I could hear someone talking to a guy trying to calm a man down that sounded like he was getting a breathing tube put down his throat. Sounded very similar to what it felt like when I had one put down my throat. He was screaming, yelling, obviously in a lot of pain. And they had gotten it in because he stopped screaming, it sounded like. But then I just heard this blood-curdling scream from a woman's voice. Don't leave me. No, don't leave me. You can't leave me. And then silence. So the guy obviously died. So that wasn't very good for my psyche. Started texting my wife, and I could see people rushing by the window. And it switched to this employee, this staff lady was having a party at her house. And people were going by. I was trying to yell for help, that I needed some help. Nothing. It was a really hot summer last summer. And I was always cooking and not allowed to drink anything. So this is probably day 12, day 13, day 14, something like that. Would have to get my wife to confirm that. So I hadn't eaten or drank anything through my mouth. They had this spray, something saliva, try to keep my mouth moist. So I could reach the bottle, spray it into my mouth. And they had these ridiculous sponge sticks that they would put in a liquid. And I was allowed to suck on those. Try and moisten my mouth because I was so dry, so hot. They would bring bags of ice and ice my body to try and cool me down a bit. Then I got sick. C. diff, I think it's called. Where you get basically chronic diarrhea. So then I had a dream about diarrhea. This wasn't good. I'm not going to get into the details of that one for you. Woo! Again, yeah, if people have experienced anything like this, please shoot me a comment. I would love to communicate with you and talk to some people that have gone through a similar situation. Anyhow, I survived the diarrhea. It was a huge hassle for anybody visiting me because they had to gown up, mask, gloves, gown. My granddaughter had a very hard time having to wear all this stuff in to see me. But she did. Everybody did. Go through the whole rigmarole. Then when I would have these dreams, my wife would call the nursing station, and then I would get help, and they would pull me out of it. Even though I was awake, like I was still experiencing this. I was still in that room, still in that house, going through it. and they would just integrate into it, calm me down, give me some more drugs, and send me right back into it. The times when I woke, I just wanted to be discharged is all I would do. Still couldn't talk, so taking lots of notes. Couldn't walk. I remember my friends telling me, my friend Sean, whose wife works in the hospital, man, you don't want to get out of this hotel too fast. Where you're going is nothing. You don't get the service and taken care of like you do in ICU. But all I could think of was to progress and get to that next level. The respiratory therapist, Terry, had said that I needed to get outside and get some fresh air. He was right. Every day, the RTs, respiratory therapists, would come in, hook me up to a hoist, lift me up out of bed, and move me over to a chair, get me sitting to straighten my lungs out and get airflow going. Part of the healing process. I couldn't do anything for myself. So Terry got me into this reclining wheelchair. It was like a lounger on casters, on wheels. And they'd hook me up to an oxygen bottle and a monitor. And he would get one of the nurses, take me outside to this place called the Healing Garden. That was amazing. Outside in the sun. Did that the first time and then was addicted. I wanted to go out there every day. You just leave me out there. I love the outdoors. Riding my bike through the country, through the mountains, from up here all the way to Sturgis. We've ridden a lot. My wife is a great passenger. She works with me. We're a great team. We put a lot of miles on, and it just felt like I was riding, being outside. Had some water features, so some couple fountains. I always wanted to sneak goldfish in there and let them loose in their fountains. Probably wouldn't have survived with the chemicals they had going. Lots of flowers, lots of plants, and a big bell. The bell was for people that had made it, that survived. So I told everyone that I was going to stand up and ring that bell. When I was ET, would come into my room every day, stretch me, exercise me. One time they got me onto I think it was called a tilt table, where it's basically a hospital bed with a footboard on it. They got me onto that, and I remember every time I moved, I had to be hoisted with this crane, the hoist. So it was a bit of an ordeal. I'm a big guy, so they got me onto this table. That took some effort. They had to strap me to this table, and then they slowly started lifting it up to where it was upright. Felt so good to be standing, even though I was using very little of my own muscles because I was strapped into this thing. They were really concerned about vertigo, getting dizzy. But I did okay with it. It was a huge relief to be on that thing. But I could only do it for a short period of time, and my body started giving out. But they were diligent. They came in and worked with me frequently, and a great team. And my wife had brought in my small Bluetooth speaker, so I asked if I could put some tunes on, and they came in. So that became the routine. He'll come into work with me, I'd get my phone out, find a good playlist. Every day I would just raise the volume a little bit more. So we rocked out. I'm sure you could hear it through the whole floor of the ICU. There were times that I kept it playing after they had left. Kept waiting to be told to turn it off or down. Actually, they did make me turn it down a couple of times. But most of the time, they loved it. The staff there enjoyed the music. I had a playlist going with a lot of Queen on it. Another one bites the dust. How can you not love that song in that situation? And then, as I started progressing, We Will Rock You. So I always looked forward to those visits from OT and PT. I still don't really figure out why they call it OT, occupational therapy. Really, it's waist up and waist down therapy. PT is waist down. OT is waist up. I guess it's because occupational therapy, they work with getting people back to living, doing daily functions. So then I still had the tracheostomy in. So I'm at, a month of no eating or drinking. All I got cravings. I would dream about these cravings. I wanted a Coke Slurpee so bad. Every day when my wife and daughter would leave, I'd ask if I needed anything, and I would word mouth the words, Coke Slurpee. Needless to say, I wasn't allowed. Something with the tracheostomy, that the tube that goes down the throat will redirect liquid and food into the lungs. So it'd kill me. Which also gave me an idea of how to end it, because going through the depression of not being able to live like this was a lot, and I'm not going to get into that here because it'll probably not be allowed to be on YouTube. But yeah, considered it many times. I just wanted flavor in my mouth, not that dumb spray and that sponge. I'd pestered my wife enough that she actually brought me in. Sorry, Benji. Gonna come clean on this. She brought me in a Coke gummy, not weed gummy, the Coke flavored. You know what I mean? The cola chewy gummies. She said, "Okay, give this to you, but you can't swallow it. You can just suck on it." Chewed it and swallowed it. It was so good. She just looks at me in horror, waiting for me to fall over dead. Well, I didn't fall over dead. It went well. So needless to say, at that point, there's no way I was going to stop asking for a Coke Slurpee. Buddy of mine that helped me get through this whole ordeal texted me, said he's coming in for a visit. Do I need anything? Yeah, a Coke Slurpee. He brought one. I couldn't even get a sip of it in, and they had taken it away. I was under constant surveillance. I asked everybody. I tried everything. Get a Coke Slurpee. Needless to say, when I did finally get a Coke Slurpee, it wasn't quite as good as I was expecting. Although, there was another time I was still in ICU. Another friend of mine, Holly, was coming in. Call her my Coke smuggler. She asked if I needed anything. I said, yeah, bottle of Coke. So I figured I could hide that easier than a Slurpee with a straw in it. So with the straw, I figured I could get a haul on this thing before I got busted, and I could hide it. My wife wasn't there. So Holly comes in with a Coke, gives me the Coke. I had other friends that were there as well. I was visited lots. I have great people in my life. So I'm very fortunate that way. There are people that go through this that don't have the same support structure and network that I had. So Holly handed me this Coke. I took this haul on it. You should have seen this nurse. She had superpowers. She was so fast going from that. I didn't think she'd seen it. She saw it. She came in like I'm doing a line of blow. Grabbed the Coke out of my hands. My friends are like, whoa, what's going on? She said, absolutely not. Takes it. Friend of mine took it, put the lid on it, threw it in the garbage. Well, needless to say, she came in there several times after that to check on us, see what else I was up to. Anyhow, that was the best sip of anything I've ever had in my life. That was incredible. And the last one I had for a long time. Then I got onto ice chips. I was allowed to have some ice chips. Monitored. I had to have someone there. So my wife was like, we'll watch them. Like one ice chip at a time. Crunch, crunch, gone. Another ice chip. Crunch, crunch, gone. Then they were bringing them in a cup. So then they asked, I was allowed to start drinking slowly. My wife asked if she could bring a cooler in with some ice. So she did. And she had a bag of ice, and I grabbed this big chunk of ice out of the bag in the cooler, threw it in my mouth, filled my mouth. Nurses on that shift freaked out, made me spit it out. I do not like being told what to do. So I made a little bit of a scene on that one. Anyhow, I was able to start eating food, drinking liquid, not so much on the eating food side, till they moved me upstairs, 5th floor, geriatric/stroke ward. This was not a good environment for me. My buddy was right. I should have stayed in the hotel. I just wanted to progress so bad. I wanted to move forward. There was one more step for me to get closer to home, right? If I can get out of ICU, get into the stroke ward, I can start dealing with this stuff, get into full-time OT and PT. Finally got the trach out, the tracheostomy out of the throat. That was the big goal in order to move to the stroke ward. Progress. And I had to hound them for days. There's several steps. You got to be able to breathe on your own, obviously. Swallow without choking. So it was quite the relief when they slid it out of my throat. It goes down quite a ways. That was good. And then they packed up my room with my wife and daughter's help. And then the big move. So I was quite excited until I rolled in. I noticed the sign was geriatric/stroke, ward 52 on the 5th floor. Minimum of 4 patients to the rooms, but quickly realized there were a lot of patients that were, because it's geriatric, dealing with not just stroke, but with dementia and stroke. Lots of neighbors moving in and out, transferring out of the ward, new ones coming in. So they turned over quite regular. Stroke is busy, and dementia is probably even busier. Had some great neighbors. Pekka is one I remember. He's an older gentleman, tough as nails, kept trying to get up and get out of bed, would fall on the floor and just look at me helplessly on the floor. He was straight across from me. So I'd look for my call bell, hit the call bell. I had to click that probably 50 times for him in the time that we shared the room together. He would choke, and because he wasn't supposed to eat anything without the nurses there, but he would. He had stuff hid. He was a survivor. He could stand up a little bit, walk very little. Used a walker, so wasn't wheelchair bound. Wiped out once, going to the bathroom. Got up, got his walker. I just knew there was going to be trouble. You could hear his walker dragging a two-wheeled walker, so the front legs don't have wheels. So it makes this horrible vibrating sound. So I knew he was on the move. Made it to the bathroom, did his business. Then coming out of the bathroom, when I heard the crash. So I knew he was down. So I got my call button. As soon as he would start moving, I would have my call button, try and find it. Pretty tricky finding that thing sometimes. With no use of left arm, can't sit up. It was usually right within reach, but couldn't find it. Same with my cell phone. Can't tell you how many times I lost my cell phone within 6 inches of my body. My glasses as well seem to go hand in hand, just always losing them. Find the call bell, ring the call bell, get people to help me. Can I help you? Yeah, I'm trying to find my cell phone. And it's like laying right beside my leg. The other worst thing, the terrible thing about that unit was poop. It was everything poop. A lot of them, the people couldn't go to the bathroom. I was one of them. So I couldn't use a walker at that point. In order for me to use the toilet, they would have to get the sling under me, hoist me up. The wheelchair that I had wouldn't fit into the bathroom door designed for this, right? So many issues with this. Being a bigger guy, not fitting in things, on things, around things. So, unfortunately, there was only three other options. One was to use a bedpan, where you got to roll over, which I couldn't do. And they would slide the bedpan under you, which is like laying on a cooking pot. It was horrible. So a couple times I actually was able to get it under me. And then you can't go. They go through this whole rigmarole. So then they wanted to use a commode, they called it. It was basically a wheelchair with a toilet seat on it, with a pod underneath. So they would bring that into my room. They just divided with curtains. So they'd have to sling me up, get me onto my walker, push the commode under me, sit down. Couldn't go. So then it ended up, okay, well, you're just going to use a brief, which is a fancy name for a diaper. So from that point on, I pooed myself. And most of the people in the room were doing the same. You can imagine the smell in this room. There was one time we had Adam and Jen over visiting, or no, it was just Jen. And my neighbor let one loose that was eye-watering. Incredible. And then you got to go through the whole cleanup, which is even a worse smell when they pull the blankets off. Oh, anyhow, I'm not going to get into details, but it was terrible. So some good neighbors. Kirk was a good neighbor. He would wake up every morning and think he was in a different place, different hospital, different location. The stroke lottery. So he lost short-term memory. Wouldn't remember things that just happened. So every day he had to go through this process to remind himself of things. And I would help him because he was chatty, so he would ask me things all the time. Then the nurses would come in to check on him, and we'd kind of run through a bit of a checklist of where he was, the date, things like that. Trying to help him pass the test, right? Good guy, though. Got me onto some good music. Just had a real hard time motivating himself to get up and do the work. Everyone wins the stroke lottery or loses the stroke lottery in different ways. So that's when I started figuring that out. Some people lose cognitive way more than I did, and speech called aphasia. So I started realizing what people's disabilities were and how they were not visibly disabled. But trying to understand through these different neighbors that I had cycling in and out. You got to hear them because you're just separated by thin curtains. that never got washed, by the way. There's some things happening in those on those curtains that I was quite surprised about the cleanliness or lack of. The halls were pretty active, where we had several people with dementia would park out in the halls and just yell at people, and this would happen throughout the night as well. Not knowing where they were, afraid, you could hear the fear in their voices and anger. Some people turn angry with it. Had one neighbor, Marty, that Marty, if you're listening, you probably don't have your headphones on and you got it turned up way too loud. So Marty, turn it down a little bit. Non-stop Friends episodes playing on his pad, volume cranked all the way up. This was till lights out, from lights on till lights out, every day, all day. Diapers. I don't know. I saw a video once of a couple did a funny video where they were going to try these Depends out. They're sitting at the table with these on. Have you gone yet? No. And then the dude is like, yeah, it's not like that. There's very little when you're peeing or pooing yourself. So for the peeing, they wanted me to use a urinal, they call them, plastic jug. Well, I had no arms, basically. My right side broken, my left side stroked out. So trying to coordinate this thing was atrocious. I had some pretty bad experiences with that, and embarrassing. Lots of embarrassment. You become very humbled going through this process. If anyone's gone through it, you know what I mean. Shoot me a message in messaging if you can relate to this. Would love to hear your story. So then every night there was the diaper gang that would come through, and there was a whole squad of them, and they would hit every room, 4 to 5 patients in it, and they would go through everybody in there, basically whether you needed it or not. They were pretty quick, but it was twice a night. So lights on, sleep was tough. Between the yelling, the lights, the noise, rolling carts up and down the halls, especially with the diaper gang. One thing I really struggled with was my nicotine addiction. Still do. I was a fairly heavy smoker up to the accident, and then haven't had a cigarette since. I am now 10 months into this. Yeah. So they had me on the patch. Patch seemed to work okay. Then I started becoming sensitive to adhesives, the tapes, and just the adhesive on the patch would mess with me. It get super itchy and scratchy. So I've started using different things now since then. Boy, I wanted to go for a smoke. But all I think about with that place is the Lynyrd Skynyrd song. Can't you smell that smell? The smell of poop around you. And then to change the diapers and change the bedding when I had a mess, I had to roll. So they would try and figure out which side I could roll onto best. Pretty hard because I couldn't roll. They got pretty good at turning me. Some of these ladies are pretty small. A lot of Filipinos. They're smaller statured people. They would use different tools to move me. One of them was an inflatable mattress. They would do a slide. I always ended up sliding down the bed. I always ended up at the foot of the bed somehow. I couldn't use my legs to push myself up. I couldn't use my arms to reach up and pull on the handles of the bed. I was kind of at the mercy of my weight and gravity. So I would just end up at the bottom of the bed every day in a pile of mess. So they would inflate this mattress, and then they would slide me on this mattress. Or the blanket that I was on was slippery on the mattress. They were able to pull me up. So they'd have to pull the bed out. Someone would have to get behind the bed, grab this thing. This compressor inflates this thing. They would pull me back up to the top of the bed and then roll me. So grabbing the handle on the opposite side, which I couldn't use this at all. So I usually went to my left side and used my right side with the broken ribs and shoulder. Try and roll. They would pull stuff out. It was quite the event every night. So I was tiring of that very quickly. Getting more and more depressed. I called that place Beirut because I just couldn't imagine being in a hospital, a war hospital, being much worse than this. So depression set in pretty hard. Constantly wanting to go home and not being able to go home. So thought seriously about ending it several times there. Figured out how I was going to do it. They had mental health nurses, and a shrink would come and see me every once in a while, and that was nice. Being able to talk about the stuff that was bothering me. At the same time, my wife's going through cancer and healing from her last surgery. And when she was notified that she had cancer the year previous, we had a business, a plumbing and heating company that was struggling at the time. And then my wife got sick. And then it was almost on a daily basis going for treatment. I wasn't at work a whole lot. So I made the decision finally just to pull the plug on the business, focus on my wife's health. So we did that. So that pushed us into just a horrible position financially. If any of you have claimed bankruptcy before, you know what I'm talking about. So we had to file for personal bankruptcy to protect us from the business. But I had signed a bunch of personal guarantees. I'll get into the bankruptcy stuff in another episode. But at this point, just dealing with all of that stress and with my new disabilities, pretty tough. One thing that, another one that really grated on me was bathing. So I'm in 2 months now, and I still haven't had a bath. They do bed baths where you got to roll again. They wipe you down, change your diaper, change the bedding, catch your privates, your armpits. Pretty simple stuff. Not really simple, but painful. So that's how I was bathing. They also had this thing. I had long hair at the time. They had this thing that where they could wash my hair. They did a couple different things. They did a nightcap once. They would put like some kind of a soap in my hair and then put this nightcap on and kind of wash it through the nightcap. But my hair was quite long, right? So it was an event. So I was a stinky man. Started getting some use in my left arm. Started being able to move my shoulder. Hardest part was not the hardest part. I keep saying that, but there were so many hard parts to this trip. I kept sliding out of the wheelchairs they'd put me in, and like again, like I'm a big guy. That says every time I'm in a wheelchair, and I couldn't keep my arm on the armrest. It would fall off, and it would fall heavy like this, and hurt my shoulder, and like really hurt. So lots of shoulder pain. This arm I could move. So then at that point in time I was still on feeding tube and wasn't eating food yet. Oh, I could eat a little bit of food. My daughter snuck in some watermelon. One of my cravings, right? Coke Slurpee, watermelon, and pineapple. That's all I wanted. So my daughter brought in some watermelon, gave it to me. It was amazing. That food texture in my mouth, the flavor was just incredible. Like it was artificial. It was so intense. So that went without event, so that was good. But then I was getting sick of the feeding tube, and I was getting really bloated. I just felt like whatever they were putting into me was not good for me. And I don't know if you've ever had a food feeding tube before. I ended up having 4 of them put in that would pull them out. So now this is 2 months in. Trach is out, feeding tube is still in. I know I can eat, but they won't let me. So I had one of the male nurses there, Latino, that I spoke Spanish with. That was nice. There's a couple Latinos in that hospital. It was nice to be able to converse in Spanish again. I grew up in Mexico. Another story. So I asked him, like, how do I get this thing out? And he said, well, you got to go for a swallow test, and then it needs to be signed off. Some people with strokes, I guess they get paralyzed in their throat as well, and they choke on anything they eat, especially after the tracheostomy. So I said, well, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm going to take this thing out. He wouldn't do it. I said, so what happens if I do it? And I had taken 3 out already previously. So I knew I could do it. And he said, well, I'm leaving the room. What happens when I'm gone happens when I'm gone. So the second he walked out the door, it goes down your nose, in your throat, and they x-ray, supposed to x-ray, where it ends up in your stomach so it doesn't go into a lung. So I pull this thing out. Very bizarre feeling. And basically gave them no choice. So then they sped up the feeding test. So and load me into the wheelchair. Quite pissed off at me. Wasn't on their schedule, right? And I mean, healthcare, that's a tough job. With all the nurses and doctors that I went through this ordeal, becomes pretty apparent which nursing staff are doing this because they want to do this, and which ones are doing it because they just need a job and the shifts work out for them. So I got to be nice regardless and follow their schedule. So into the feeding test. It was kind of fun. So remember, like, I've hardly eaten a couple bites of food, a gummy, piece of watermelon. That's really been about it for food for coming up to 2 months now. Different textured foods. And they had a camera. How'd they do that? They had some kind of a device set up, like x-raying. Oh yeah, x-raying my throat for every bite of different texture. Soft, slimy textures. There was one where I struggled a little bit, where it was different. It was canned fruits. You know what I mean? Like fruit cocktail. So different textures of fruit, and on the same spoon. I struggled a little bit with that. The rest of them, though, I was fine. And they're sitting in a different room, which is really weird. You can see them through the window, but they're looking on the monitor. And she has a microphone who's talking to me and the gentleman who's giving me the food. So his job is just feeding people. What a weird job. I could probably do that. So a spoonful of this, swallow. Next spoonful of this. And then the drinks. Went on to liquids. Did those different textures of liquids. Ended up passing it anyway with this one mixed texture issue. So got the green light on eating. Well, now I'm feeling much better. So there's a cafeteria down on the main floor of the hospital with coffee, donuts. I wanted chicken nuggets. So my daughter got me some chicken fingers. Oh yeah, so good. Coffee. Oh, for 2 months, doctors and nurses would be walking by with their cup of coffee. I could smell the coffee and just watch them drink it. They were enjoying it. I wanted a cup of coffee so bad. Got my cup of coffee. Thank you, Emily Ruth, my daughter, for being so diligent and persistent in sneaking me in that watermelon, and then running me down to that cafeteria every day. So eating was improving. Food tube is out. Shower, we got that done. Coca-Cola, I got Coca-Cola. My brother Jason was on his way up to visit from Florida. And when he heard about the accident, we were texting back and forth. And he asked if I needed him sooner than what he was coming. And I had to be honest with him and said, yeah, I need you. Well, that dude, what a blessing from God that guy is. So him and his wife moved into the house. His wife works remotely, so she was able to set up right here and do her work. He would come into the hospital. As soon as it was open and allowed guests in, he would show up. Well, he had no problem moving me on that mattress. He'd straighten me out as soon as he'd get there. We'd talk for a bit. There was the compressor to pump up the mattress. Wasn't working great. There was an air leak. Next day he shows up with Gorilla Tape. Fixes the hose. Goes, hey, I can work this thing. I was sliding down in the bed. Said, I need my call bell. What for? Well, I need to be moved up in the bed. I can move you up. No, you got to use that compressor. I'll figure it out. The guy can fix anything. One of those guys. So within 30 seconds, compressor's running, gets me pumped up, and like nothing, slides me up in the bed. Felt so good. And then would take me out to the garden, the healing garden that I mentioned before. Every day, I'd start sliding. He'd stand behind that wheelchair, like nothing, move me up. Super strong guy. Well, I was getting spoiled. This was great. Visitors would come. He would leave for an hour or so, let me visit with friends. Other relatives would come, and then he'd be right back. Amazing. It's great to have those kind of people in your life. I don't know how I would have felt if I didn't have people like that. My wife, my daughter, my whole family, actually. I had cousins come up from Calgary to visit. Thank you very much for going out of your way to do that. My cousin Denise from Vancouver Island came twice to see me, spend some time with me. So I was doing much better at this point. Now I wanted to get to rehab was the next step. There's basically two options for rehab. Inpatient rehab. So still in the healthcare care system. I had Glenrose, which was across the street from the hospital that I was in. And so closer for my wife, 45 minutes from the house, or Panoka, a place called Halvard Johnson Center for Brain Injury, which was an hour and a half drive on the freeway, on the highway from where I lived. So quite a ways away. There was no way I was going to be able to get daily visits from her. One of the cousins that came up to visit me from Red Deer, which is just outside Panoka, Jackie and her husband, my aunt, her mom, and her sister Deneen came to see me. And Jackie was very gracious and said, anytime you want to use my house, please feel free. If it's easier for Benjamin and Emily to come down and stay the night, then my house is your house. So they did that 2 or 3 times. Thank you so much, Jackie. It was amazing to have them. They'd come down for on like a Thursday or Friday, stay the weekend, go home Sunday or Monday. It was so good. Then I was allowed, we'll get onto that later. So I had the choice between these 2 facilities, Glenrose or Panoka. They were like, I was concerned because my wife had another surgery coming up on September 10th. So I was concerned, very concerned, about my wife's health and the proximity, how much travel time she's going to be able to endure. So they said Glenrose, across the street, nice and close. But their objective at the Glenrose is to get you out within 8 weeks. And I knew this was going to take longer than 8 weeks. So we prayed about it, went through all the pros and cons. And Panoka was a longer term facility. Panoka is basically set up to work with patients for 6 months. So 8 weeks compared to 6 months. My objective was to get as good as I could. So I made the decision to go to Panoka. Very hard decision. I felt very selfish about it. But it was the right decision.